Welcome to the Oracle Mobile Application Framework YouTube channel. In this episode I talk about device integration, and specifically I talk about programmatic access to device integration. In a previous recording I talked about declarative options, so if you're interested in how to do this declaratively, just go back a recording and you will see how that works in MAF. This architecture picture is something that I showed in a previous recording as well. It's the access path that you have for your application to integrate with device capabilities like camera, GPS, or properties like the operation system, the version, the maker, the display size, and so on. The access all goes through the Cordova plugin architecture that we use in MAF as a foundation to access the local device. And then the options that we provide in MAF to access these are declarative, data control, and implicit expression language objects, or on the feature level using the constraint functionality, and programmatically using the device manager API, which is a Java API, or a JavaScript API, which again wraps the Cordova API to access the device. In this recording we look at programmatic options here, and the first one to look at is the device manager. However, before doing that, let's think about the use cases that would require programmatic access to the device integration, especially compared to the use cases that we mentioned for declarative access, which typically is like showing or hiding functionality. Now with programmatic access, you for instance could decide to sort or query data depending on the current geolocation that the user is with a mobile device, to filter and tailor the data to the needs of the user. You could use that to upload images to a remote server, or you could display local file based on logic within your client business application logic. So this all could be done in Java, and these Java options will be from a managed bean or from a data control, as we'll see on another slide. You could check the network status. For instance, if you're working with a POJO data control, and if you don't know what a POJO data control is, just go to one of the previous recordings and you will learn all about it. Now, if a POJO data control needs to make this decision whether to query data from a remote web service or query data from a local storage like SQLite, then accessing the network status in Java will help it to do this decision. Yeah, so different strategies in reading and writing data, and knowing about the network status surely helps, and that is what you can do through Java as well. And then of course you can write an SMS or write an email even from Java. It's not that you can send it right away, because it will just launch the email client for security reasons, but you can do that in the context of your application, so people don't have to go explicitly out of your application just to launch the email client. So Java access, and I mentioned that's through an API called the device manager. And I will give you some examples here, and you will see how easy and straightforward that functionality is accessible through that API. First of all, before going into the details, I mentioned that the access to the device manager is from everything that actually has Java in it. Now this is the POJO data control, because it's a Java bean based data control, and it's a managed bean, which you work with if you define task flows, especially if you're working with AMX, where that is a feature. And then there is another one. I just put it to this kind of pseudo rectangle here, where I say, well, JavaScript. Yes, we understand there's a JavaScript API by itself. So if I, as a MAF developer, would write my local HTML files, I could use JavaScript directly to access these APIs. However, there might be a use case where from Java you call into JavaScript, and you want to have JavaScript calling back into Java and accessing device properties there. And that is what you can do as well. I'm not going into any further details on how to use that approach, but it's an option. So if whenever you have this weird requirement to call out into JavaScript, call back into Java to access a device property, then you can do that as well. MAF is very flexible on this end. So device integration from Java, well, I mentioned you can display a local file, take a picture maybe in the context of your business logic, you want to take a picture and send it off to the server. Example would be an insurance case where not you, but actually the user will have an accident and then the car is damaged or whatever is broken, so they want to take a picture and with the report upload that images to the remote server, and that is what you can trigger from Java. Same for sending SMS or getting the geolocation for context or location specific information that you want to do, or the queries I mentioned, and the get to the, access to the network status as well. But then there are other things like the device properties that you want to access to, like operation system. The screen size might be of interest for you, and this is what you get through the device manager. And I will give you some examples for how you work, for instance, with GPS, how you find a contact in Java. I'm not reading all of the source code that I show on the next slides to you, because you can read it yourself, but I want to talk you through how you work with the Device Manager API. First of all, the Device Manager API has a Java doc, like everything in Java land is somewhere documented, and that's the Java doc. It's accessible on the Oracle network, so I put the links up there. It's part of our documentation. You can click on that, it will give you examples, and it will also give you example codes, so you don't have to just look at the Java method and try to make sense out of the arguments that are passed in. It will help you with that. So recommendation, really get to that site and have a look to the API description here. Now in the first example, we take the example of sending an SMS. And here we have a wrapping functionality in our application that takes arguments that will provide us with the phone number to send the SMS to, as well as the text that we want to send. And then to send the SMS, we just compose a string with a number, as I said, and with a body, pass that into the function and just call device send SMS, and that will then receive the to and the text field. The same or similar, I should say, when we want to access the camera. Again, we need to get access to the device manager. The camera allows us to provide specific information about, for instance, the quality of the image that we want to create. And here the quality is expressed in percentage from a range of 0 to 100. Be aware that if you have a device which has a very high resolution camera, then the file size, of course, becomes bigger and thus the load heavier. And some of the mobile devices tend to run out of memory if you deal with too big images here. Then you can define it, the distinct type. Do you want to have a reference to an image on the file system, or do you want to have the image being returned as a base64 encoded data stream, which makes it a good candidate for streaming it to a remote server? The source type could be specified with as an argument, like, do you want to read that directly from the camera or from the photo library that you have on your device? And some of the devices allow you to even edit the camera taken picture before you send it off, so you can specify this as well. And then typically, dependent on the setting, what you get in return is either a URL to a local file system reference where the image that you took is put, so that you can, for instance, display it in your user interface by just having an AMX image tag, and you reference this in the image tag source property reference the URL, or you just have the base64 encoded stream that you can, of course, reference from AMX images, or just take it in Java and load it to a remote server using a SOAP call or a REST call. So these are the settings that you can do, and so we just see here the API definition, and then you call the device manager and it will give you exactly the image, and you work with the image. So here's the example of reading a picture from a library. So I have the call to get picture. I go for 100%, so in the hope it's a small picture. The destination type is file URL because it's part of my library, and the source type I specify as camera library, so I'm reading an existing image, and then the encoding type JPEG to have a smaller footprint in the memory, And the size and the quality, when I specify 0 for that, so if I put the last arguments as 0, then it will use the image properties as they are, the original size and quality. Yeah. Another example is how to access geolocations, and here of course we have two use cases. One is just to know where I'm standing right now, and one is to track where I'm going. So if I'm moving and I want to print that on a map, then that's something I can do with the GeoLocation API as well from Java. Again, I have different arguments here. So one is the interval in which the position is updated. So it's kind of a asynchronous call that you have, and then every once in a while it takes the snapshot of where the position is and returns it to the calling client, in which case that is Java. The accuracy I can specify, so how accurate I do want to have that position to be evaluated. I can produce a watch ID. This is what I would need if I want to track movement. Yeah, so then I need to have a watch ID so I can reference that and get that information. Then of course there's a parameter with a callback information, because the functionality needs to know where to call after the interval is expired. And that's the basic API that you would use to code from Java against the device manager. And here's an example where the device starts actually updating the position. So I put an interval as 2000 milliseconds, so every 2 seconds I want to get information about where the position is. There's a handle ID I pass in, and then a new geolocation callback, which I then actually provide with the position of where actually my current location is. So I will receive the position of the location and do whatever I want to do within that little code there. I could write it back to the local database, I can write it back to the server, or just print it on a map, as MAF provides you map capabilities. Working with contacts, well, in a previous recording we showed how to do the same declaratively. Now this is the example on how to do this with Java. There is a contact object that is provided, so you see it's not that we have primitive arguments here like string, integer. We have a contact as an object, and this class is provided as part of the MAF framework. So contact, new contact allows you to create a new contact or to define a new contact. For that contact you define a name, you can define the family name, you set the given name, everything that typically you see when you go on your device, on the mobile device, and look into context. All of that information will be made available in an object structure. So you fill in that information, you see that there's a contact field object that you work with, where you put in what type of phone number you're providing, mobile, landline, and so on. And then you set the phone number, and at the very last you say, okay, device, create contact, and then you pass the nested object, the parent object with its contact, as an argument, and that will create, given the permission is granted and you checked for that, it will then create the new contact on the mobile device. And this is what it can do within MAF. So MAF provides you that as a Java API. So that was the Java integration to it, and you see that really everything I expose in data controls or for implicit expression language users, for declarative use, everything I have there, I also have available in Java to integrate with my business logic on the client side. The last topic to cover would be how to do the same with JavaScript, and here the JavaScript feature, most likely it's more what you will look for when you build local HTML features or remote URL features. For AMX, which is a primary feature that you would use if you go for declarative development, most likely the Java API plus the declarative options is enough. However, JavaScript is there as an option. We are wrapping the code of our API set, so there's a package called ADF MAF API, and that gives you access to sending emails, sending SMS. There's an option to invoke container methods, So what we can do is we can call from JavaScript into Java, and remember this little pseudo rectangle, as I called it, where I say, okay, the option would be to call into Java from JavaScript, get device properties. However, I don't need to do that because the JavaScript API itself provides that functionality. So more on integration, on interaction feature to be able to invoke Java methods from JavaScript. If, however, you're an HTML developer, if you work with local HTML, you use the local HTML feature in MAF, then the JavaScript API is your way of accessing the functionality on the device, and it goes through the Cordova API. Now, this is the extended list, or the extended table of what we started when I talked about declarative options for device integration. So we see that device properties are accessible from expression language and Java. So maybe one of the options, if you don't want to go for Cordova straight to get the properties of a device to call out into Java. Maybe that's the missing use case. Beside of that, you see that SMS, email and contact are accessible through data controls, Java and JavaScript. Of course, displaying a file is not something you do in JavaScript. However, you can do this from Java and from the data control. This concludes the 2 recordings that we have on the Mobile Application Framework YouTube channel about device integration. The key points here are: the MAF Application Framework provides you access to the device property and functionality so that you can make use of that in your mobile application development, and you can make use of that declaratively or programmatically from Java, JavaScript, or declarative when you work on a feature level, data control, or using expression language. And I hope that that gets you going in creating applications that really rock the mobile device.